Good afternoon and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of Allerdale Borough Council. My name's Lee Jardine and I'm the Democratic Services Officer and for the purpose of this meeting I'm also the host. I'll be assisting the committee with the use of technology during the process of the meeting. I won't have any control of the meeting and the meeting won't begin until instructed by the chair. The meeting is currently being live streamed on YouTube and a recording will be made available afterwards. Everyone who's now indicated they're joining the meeting is now joined and the meeting is now locked. Shortly I'll hand it over to the chair, but first of all, introductions. Can I ask the attendees to introduce themselves, starting with the members? Councillor Annison.
Councillor Tony Annison.
Thank you. Councillor Crouch.
Councillor Crouch.
Thank you. Councillor Daniels.
Councillor Alan Daniels.
Councillor Greeny.
Councillor Ian Greeny.
Thank you. Councillor Heaslip.
Hello, Councillor Michael Heaslip. I'll be chairing this meeting shortly.
Councillor Horsley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Horsley.
And Councillor Lansbury.
Afternoon, Councillor Lansbury.
Thank you. We also have Councillor Fitzgerald.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Marion Fitzgerald, the portfolio holder for Policy, Strategy and Human Resources.
Thank you. Now we'll move over to the officers. Ian Hind.
Hello, I'm Ian Hind. I'm Policy Officer for Scrutiny and Partnerships.
Nick Hardy.
Good afternoon, I'm Nick Hardy. I'm Assistant Chief Executive for Policy, Performance and Economic Strategy.
Alex Fitzgerald.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Fitzgerald, Policy Manager for Corporate Information and Performance.
Thank you. Helen Sant.
Good afternoon, I'm Helen Sant and I'm the Policy Manager for Health Improvement and Inequalities.
Thanks very much for everyone's introductions. I'll now hand over to the chair to start the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Michael Heaslip chairing the meeting. Can I welcome all members present? There are no other participants present, so as I can see at the moment, we'll come to that in a moment. Can we get on to the agenda and to the first item, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of November. Can we accept them as a correct record? Is that agreed? If nobody shouts no, I'll take it as agreed. And also the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November. And again, can we take them as a correct record? And if nobody shouts up, I will.
Chair, we have Councillor Greeny raising his hand.
Have we? Right, okay. Councillor Greeny.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just with the minutes on the 27th of November, section 1.185, the back page, where it refers to Councillor Greeny took over as chair of the meeting. It doesn't actually state what the report title is that was delivered at that time. Can we just have that included within the minutes? Councillor Greeny delivered a summary of the report, including the recommendations. It would just be useful if we had the title of the report included within those minutes. And it was the Procurement Task and Finish report. If that's okay, Lee?
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Councillor Greeny. So that's just an amendment to the minutes. Can we have that seconded and by anyone? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll second it from the chair, if I may.
Thank you. And then just over to yourself, Councillor Heaslip, if anyone else has any comments. If not, we'll just we can accept them as they are.
Is that amendment to the minutes is agreed? Simply the insertion of the procurement task and finish group as a subheading for the section where Councillor Greeny took over as chair. Is that okay?
Yeah,
right.
I'll make that amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other issues from members about the?
It doesn't appear to be any raised hands.
No, nothing there. So we'll agree those minutes as correct then. And I know we don't do matters arising, but I just want to refer to 3 issues that we need to make sure we pick up later in the meeting. One is about local government reorganisation. Of course, that's a continuing issue. We need to consider at some point in the meeting whether we want to include any future consideration of that. We have, for members only, received some details from the officers about the GLL payments issue, which is at the foot of page 10 of your papers. And again, we need to consider where we need to go with that in the future. And I would just like to refer to the resolution, the agreed resolution at 179 on local government reorganisation, to refer to the meeting that was suggested to look at understanding decision-making process between executive and council. Just for clarity on that, what we're looking at is not that in the context of local government reorganisation, but in the context of the policy framework and the relationship between council's policy framework and executive's policies, and what the relationship is and why something's one and not the other, and vice versa. And I know that's something that Nick Hardy was looking at in terms of review with his policy team of the entire policy framework, and indeed the entire corpus, if I can use that word without Tony Anderson correcting me, I think I can use that word, of policies and strategies that exist within the council. So just we get a better understanding of that. And again, we need to make sure, not now, but we need to make sure that we pick that up as an item for the future. Okay. So can we then go on to the next item on our agenda, which is apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Bell, Granger, Scott, Hedworth, Kirkbride and McCarran Holmes. Councillor McCarran Holmes today is replaced by Councillor Lansbury. Thank you.
Okay, welcome Councillor Lansbury. Any declarations of interest? No. No, I take it there are no declarations of interest. And have we received any questions? I'm not aware of any.
No questions, Chair.
No questions have been received. And at item 5, any issues for public participation?
No,
nothing
Chair.
Nothing has been received. So we can go straight on then to item 6, which is the progress report from the climate change group. So at this point, we'll play a little bit of musical chairs. So Councillor Lansbury, who is otherwise substituting for Councillor McCarran Holmes, will for this item cease to substitute for Councillor McCarran Holmes and will report from the climate change group with Councillor Fitzgerald, I understand.
Yeah.
So over to you. Sally, are you going first?
Yep. Thanks for that introduction. I will begin and then hand over to Marion. So thank you for the opportunity to report back to this group. The climate change group has been cracking on and having regular meetings once a month, and meeting with several different officers through the council, having presentations from them and really learning what everybody's involved with already and scoping how it crosses over the other departments within the council. So the portfolio holder for this area of work, as you know, is Marion Fitzgerald, and I'm the chair of the group. And the management and admin for the group is provided by Ian Hind. So the main thing for me to report on to you today is about the climate strategy and action plan that will underpin the work of the group. Then Marion will go on and introduce some of the work that's actually gone ahead, and we've been working with the waste and recycling team on that. So we'll come on to that in a few moments. So we've developed a framework for the updated climate change strategy and action plan. It's well underway, and each section has been allocated specific members and also officers involved with each section. It is work in progress, but we're getting there. There are several themed areas that we're working on, and I will just run through those. So it's council activities such as the office and the transport to work, and economies that can be made around the Allerdale Borough Council buildings themselves and related transport and energy and paper and so forth. And the next section is energy and resources, which could be out of Allerdale buildings themselves and within the area. So looking at partnership work such as the Cold to Cozy homes perhaps, or Charge My Car initiatives, and any other partnership activity that ties in with that. Then we have a section on transport, so looking again at the Charge My Car initiatives, but also at public transport potentials for on-demand transport schemes, and finding out what's already happening in the area and tying into those. So again, lots of partnership work needed there. Domestic adaptations and renewables for homes is another section. Planning, policy and management of the built environment. Also land management, water management and coastal erosion. The next section would be training, skills, partnerships and communication. So in that section, looking at how we can bring everybody up to a certain level of carbon literacy and how to enable that pathway to zero carbon. And then a section on waste reduction and recycling. So as I say, each different member has an area that they're particularly interested and maybe have a little bit more expertise in, and they are working with the relevant officers in those areas. We may add in some additional work areas as this work continues to bring us in line with the themes from the National Climate Change Committee, who advise government on that area. And the new themes we may, it's difficult to know if there'll be new themes or if they'll go across all themes. For example, the public health strategy that Helen works on kind of goes across all areas. So that may develop either as a new theme or as across all the themes. We also need to think about how we bring in young people and also the finance and business side of things. So the groups currently represented on several external initiatives as well. So Zero Carbon Cumbria, Joint Public Health Board, Climate Change Policy Group, and also working with local community stakeholder groups, such as Climate Emergency West Cumbria, so those are, and Sustainable Keswick. So we'd hope to have another working group as soon as it's practical to do so, but it was really successful when we did that last year, but it's kind of difficult to envisage how we would do that on Zoom, because it works really well when you're all around a table, but not so well on the Zoom call. So the work crosses over all portfolios, and so involves a range of officers and members. For example, when we look at the Resilient Communities strategy later on, you can see opportunities there for community involvement that both improve community cohesion and also help biodiversity and food sufficiency. You know, it may be that you can improve community resilience and sustainability through grow your own planting schemes, working with the Wildlife Trust, working with Garden Organic, and retrofitting schemes to reduce fuel poverty. So they kind of the climate change work crosses over all areas. So our first focus was improving waste and recycling, and we worked with Ernie Davison and Andrew Gilbert and Johnny for that, as well as the local community groups. And our next focus will be to get that strategy and action plan ready for communication in a format that it can be put on the website and passed out to stakeholder groups and everything. And the other next area we're going to work on is about land management. So that will involve Councillors Lynch and Fairbrother, together with our Parks and Open Spaces Officer, the portfolio, and perhaps representatives of Trees for Wigton and the Woodland Trust, for example. So the climate change group will report to the executive. So this update's been given as proposed by the Task and Finish group recommendations last March, but how future updates are given does need some sort of consideration and planning where we take those updates to. We will be updating the executive regularly. Whether that also needs to come back to overview and scrutiny, we need to decide the reporting structure there. So that was it from me. It's going to move on to Councillor Fitzgerald, but if anybody wanted to ask anything at that point, I'm not sure how you'd normally run the updates, but I'm happy to take any questions if you want to.
Does anybody want to ask a question at this point? I see Councillor Anderson's got his hand up. Tony, please.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. It's a question of scope and framework, really. I was at a parish council meeting. There's been a number where they're interested in what you're doing, and they're quite active, as you can imagine. And Allerdale is quite diverse, and there are sort of different sort of climate and environmental needs. And I was just wondering how you take it. I've got a particularly Colbeck in particular, Seborham, Welton, Brosley, Westward, and Welton as well. Yeah. They're very, very active in, as you can well imagine, being in the country about this, and they're very interested in the work you're doing. Have you got any sort of contact with the parish councils?
The parish council is definitely on our list of stakeholders that we should be involving. As you say, it's getting that framework for the communication with those groups in place. But as a short-term response, if we can get those names onto our stakeholder list through Ian, then they will be sent the strategy and action plan, sort of the comment and input, because it's important we get all those local projects into our action plan. And then they would be invited to a future stakeholder group, depending on the format, depending if we bring people together or if we go to people. And that will depend on the theme that we're working on at that current time and how the members involved in that group want to take that work forward. So it's very much work in progress, but we would definitely want to be in touch with them. And in the first instance, if we could get those names to Ian, we can make sure they're involved in any communications. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Any other comments or questions from members at this stage before we go on to Councillor Marion Fitzgerald? No? Okay. We'll get another chance after Marion's done her piece. Right. Okay. Marion, Councillor Fitzgerald, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as Sally mentioned just now, whilst the group has been preparing the action plan, we've also embarked on the first work stream, which was around waste and recycling. So what I'm hoping to show you now is a couple of examples. Oh, with Ian's help, here we go. A couple of examples of changes that have already taken place as a result of the climate change group's work. So one of the first things we've done is to introduce an A to Z of recycling. If you can just scroll down a little bit for me, Ian, there. So this is new to the council's website, and it replaces an earlier list, which was quite user-friendly, but nothing like as detailed as this one. So there is a lot of information on display here, and this is a live list, so that it's something that we can add to and that we can amend as new waste streams become available, and different techniques of going down the recyclable path. So that is the first change that the group has introduced. A change that we made recently, which was extremely popular with members of the public, we had a lot of positive feedback about this, was information about Christmas recycling in particular, which you can see on this page here. And on this page, you know, all the usual materials that come across your path over this period, the wrapping paper, the tree itself, and so on. A lot of detail there as to how they can be efficiently disposed of. And then thirdly, we have a page that Ernie Davison, our officer, has helped us to sort out, which explains exactly what happens to recycling in Allerdale. And I think this is a topic of quite some interest to our residents. I'm going to recommend that we do actually watch this video. It's only 2 minutes long, and it'll give members the kind of communication that we're trying to engage in. So hit play, please, Ian. So there we go. That's some examples of the kind of information that's on the website. I think we've got 1 or 2 mics open, and I think the theme music isn't quite as irritating as what you just heard there, but I think it was going around the microphone loop there, wasn't it? We've also got newsletters. Members can sign up, as you know, to council newsletters via the Chief Executive's weekly updates. And one of those is specifically dedicated to waste and recycling. Members of the public are encouraged to sign up for the waste and recycling newsletter as well. So that's examples of work that we've done already. Going forward, we're working with the comms team on a campaign going forward to sort of raise public awareness about waste and recycling, about the importance of efficient recycling processes and the need to reduce as much as possible the amount of waste that goes into landfill. So there we are. We've had 2 concurrent processes, really. I think Sally would agree. A lot of work on the forward planning and the action plan for the group generally, but that this work has started in the meantime as well.
Thanks very much, Marion. Have we any questions for Councillor Fitzgerald? While you're thinking, I'll ask one. I think, was it Wednesday? I wasn't able to watch, but I think the executive considered waste and recycling service policy, if I can call it that. Has the timing allowed that that service policy adopted by executive on Wednesday to take account of the stuff that's been coming out of the climate change group as well, or is that something, or is it as they call it, iterative exercise? It'll be, sorry, Tony, it'll be fed in again as and when, and the waste policy adopted by executive will evolve as recommendations come in from the climate change group, or indeed from anywhere else.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is included in the policy, but if you do watch the YouTube stream, you'll see that in fact I did discuss it during the meeting and made sure that it was covered. So the move towards greater public awareness and improving of recycling streams is in the policy, Mike, but I made sure that it was emphasised during the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, I'll go again then. I just want to be sure that Nick, and I'm sure he is aware in the context of the review he's doing of those shelffuls of policy and strategy documents and their relationship with the council plan and so on, that we've got a framework for fitting the recommendations of the climate change group and the climate change strategy plan that they're working on into that structure. Which I suspect won't be easy because, of course, climate change is whatever you want it to be. It can range right across the whole range of policies and strategies. So I just want to check that the policy team are alert to the need to integrate the climate change policy with the wider framework of policies that we have. Nick, please reassure me.
I can reassure you, Councillor Heasley. So I mean, obviously, as part of the council strategy, we said that environmental sustainability is at the heart of all our policies. So as we are looking at all of the new policies and all of the strategies, that we will try to ensure that that is the case.
Okay, that's fine. So we will be cross-referencing the climate change stuff across to all the other policies and so on that will sit underneath the council planning in due course, and ensuring that they feed through into service plans as well. That's good. That's reassuring. Any other questions for either Councillor Lansbury or Councillor Fitzgerald? No. Okay, well, I want to thank you both for coming, and the officers who supported the work. A good start. We're obviously a way to go yet, but at least we've made a start on that commitment. It's interesting to see that some of the recommendations are actually already feeding through into actions. We don't want strategies just sitting on shelves. They need to feed through into actions and be reflected in what we actually do. It's all very well having a strategy, but unless you actually do it, then it's a vacuous concept. So I'm pleased to see that's already happening. Okay, so I'd like to thank you both, and if there are no further comments or questions from members, we'll close that item with thanks to those who've contributed to it, and we will need to consider how we keep an eye on this in future. Then maybe the way to do that in the first instance is through the review that Nick's leading on policy and strategy across the council. And when we come to look at that, we can maybe look at how climate change is being fed into that. And at that point, it might be appropriate to get another report from the climate change group in that context. Unless, of course, there's anything that comes up in the meantime that you really think we should be excited about and you want to come and tell us, let us know. Okay, thanks very much. I'll close that item and we'll go on to item 7, update and discussion on the draft resilient community strategy, which are pages 7 to 26 in your bundle. I think Alex Fitzgerald is going to introduce that. We have.
I think Councillor Fitzgerald is just going to say a few words to start off with, if that's okay.
Of course, yes, of course. That's one of the reasons why she's here. Of course, must forget. We did have a discussion on the resilient community strategy at a previous meeting in an earlier draft. I'm assuming that the draft, I haven't been through it word for word to check, but I'm assuming that the draft that we've got now differs in some way from the first draft, and maybe at some point you'll be able to tell us in what way it does differ, but that will come to the detail of that later. First, Councillor Fitzgerald, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Resilient Communities Strategy is important in terms of setting out the approach to supporting and helping to strengthen our communities, especially, obviously, with the ongoing effects of the pandemic that we're experiencing at the moment. So the strategy underpins the Resilient Communities theme in the Council Plan, and it sets out how we can work as a council on a series of methods that can help make communities more resilient. And clearly, we can't expect to cover everything you might associate with strengthening communities, and we do have to recognise the part that the council can play in the current financial climate. So obviously, collaborating with others is going to be key, and that's all the more reason to have this strategy in place in advance so that we can recognise and maximise all opportunities to improve community resilience as these opportunities come along. You'll notice that the section on engagement signals a slight shift in approach for the council in terms of how we engage and involve people to try and help residents feel a bit more able to feed into policy and strategy development. And in that context, I'd just like to briefly mention the More Close, Stronger Together Action Group, which is an excellent example, really, of two-way interaction between the community and providers, including the council, because that initiative began with a project organised by Suzanne Wilson of UCLAN, and it was funded by the West Cumbria Community Safety Partnership. But the research itself was actually carried out by young people within the community. So the needs that were identified within the community and by the community have therefore informed the basis of agreed actions that have been delivered mainly via More Close Community Centre. So that's just one example of how community engagement to enhance resilience can work. The Resilient Community Strategy will be delivered through a series of delivery plans, for example, a leisure delivery plan and an inequalities delivery plan. So really this strategy sits in the middle between the overarching council plan at the top and the delivery plans where you'll find more detailed actions. Now, I've already received a question from Councillor McCarran Holmes concerning the Coronavirus Act 2020. And I had a look into the detail of the Act, and I think its objectives are a little bit different to the objectives of this strategy, in that the Act is more concerned with emergency decisions that need to be taken during the pandemic at central government and local government levels. And it's about fast-tracking healthcare workers safely through their training so that they can join the workforce. So it's about that sort of thing. Whereas this strategy is more about taking the positives from this terrible experience that we've had, because there are some positives in terms of the amazing work that's been carried out in communities of all sizes within Allerdale to support neighbours and to meet individual needs. So this strategy is about learning from those positives, preserving them if we can, and using them as building blocks to help us encourage and support community resilience going forward. So I'm now going to hand over to our officers, Alex and Helen, who will take you through the strategy in a bit more detail. I'm afraid I do have to leave you now because I have a meeting that starts at 2, so I'm already late. But if you have any questions that you require me in particular to answer, if you could just email them to me, I'll be happy to respond as soon as possible. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Chair, you're muted at the moment, so we haven't heard what you've said.
I was just going to say thanks to Councillor Mary Fitzgerald for a contribution to the meeting. We understand she needs to be elsewhere and won't detain her any longer. If anybody's got any questions for her, please email them to her. Thanks very much. Thanks, Marion. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right, Alex Fitzgerald, you're on now, I think.
Thank you, Chair. So just to build on what Councillor Fitzgerald said, just a little bit more detail about where the draft strategy is up to, and we were also going to update you a little bit on any comments that we'd had on it so far from any other partner organisations, etc. If you recall, the committee did see a sort of earlier iteration of what might be the content of the strategy. I think it was October, and a draft of the strategy was sent to all members in early December. The draft that you've got in your papers today doesn't really differ from the one that you will have received as an elected member in December. Very minor grammatical and sort of typographic changes, that sort of thing, but the content hasn't really been altered. So we took a view that we would wait until we'd received comments by the end of this week, and then we'll look at whether we need to make any changes. Just as a reminder, in terms of the areas that are the sort of thematic areas that are covered within the strategy, the areas of focus identified in terms of areas that we can work on as an organisation that are key areas that we think should help to strengthen communities. Those are engaging, involving, collaborating and empowering. And as Councillor Fitzgerald was saying, that's the area where we talk about shifting how we behave as an organisation, really, and how can we involve people more in terms of both decisions and thoughts around service delivery, maybe at a quite detailed level, but also in terms of those more strategic conversations and the bigger picture stuff. And then promoting healthy, active lifestyles, which covers a whole range of things, including the sort of leisure, cultural offer, that sort of thing. Addressing community safety issues, which looks at the sort of concept of sort of safe places and spaces, and it's that idea about people being able to enjoy where they live, feel safe where they live, feel able to engage where they live. And then addressing inequalities and hardship is the final area as well, and as you'd expect, that looks at things both in terms of sort of immediate need type issues, but also what we might be able to do in the longer term, working particularly in partnership, obviously, because those are bigger issues than we can deal with ourselves, really, as a single organisation. So in terms of the kind of feedback that we've had back, just to update the committee, we've shared the document quite widely through a number of sort of networks, including health networks, sport and leisure networks, community resilience group, etc., etc. And I think, and Helen can jump in if I get any of this wrong, I think it would be fair to say we've had a generally positive response. Nobody suggested that we've got it fundamentally wrong and we need to make any substantial changes to the document. I think most people said that's quite interesting, and we can see the positive benefits. I think to pick up Councillor Heaslip's point, obviously the devil is in the detail in terms of actually making sure we can deliver, because it is just a strategy document, so it sets out our intended approach, and the delivery plans that sit underneath will be the key really to how we can deliver on this. Just a couple of points that we thought we'd raise with the committee and see if people have any particular views. One of the comments we had was around whether it's clear enough in the strategy that when we're talking about engaging and involving, we're really talking about how to help our communities have a stronger voice in strategy and policy decisions, as well as in service delivery type planning. And I think that's maybe true. When we've reread the document, we maybe think it's not clear enough. It maybe talks a bit about sort of service planning type involvement, but we maybe need to strengthen that a little bit, that we are indeed talking about how we can get people more involved in those bigger conversations as well. A couple of comments around sort of inclusivity and diversity, and those sort of making sure that we manage to listen to the voices that sometimes get missed, And again, I think that comes back to those sorts of what sorts of different models there are, like the more close type work where you find something that works in a local area, and again that'll be you trying out different things in different places. But there is something we maybe need to say a little bit more about how we make sure we're not missing those voices that often get missed. I think a point, and again, Councillor Heath will probably be able to feed in a couple of his own points that he's already made, but probably a sort of general one around empowering communities to design and shape their own areas, and that sort of fits in with that locality agenda. And again, it's about finding the right, I think we've referenced, one size doesn't fit all in the document, so it's about finding something that works in the right place for those communities, or helping them preferably to find something that works for them rather than us deciding what model will work for them. And I think the only other one was just, we've had a couple of sort of very specific, maybe a little bit of wording change here. We had one, for example, around broadening out. We've talked about open spaces in the document and sort of broadening it out to not just green spaces, but that wider sort of definition of countryside or beaches, as well as the sort of traditional kind of sports fields and green fields, etc. So I think that was all we were going to sort of feed back, and then see if the committee had any sort of particular views on any of those, and whether they think those do need strengthening in the document. And if there's anything else that anybody has thought of whilst having a read, please do let us know. I think there'll be a number of routes that we can go down in terms of delivering some of this stuff, and as I said, there's various models and techniques that we can use. I mean, we've referenced a couple of things in the document, but I think there will be all sorts of things we need to experiment with, particularly in the sort of engagement and involvement field, to find the thing that works in a particular area for a particular community.
Thanks, Alex. I'm pleased that you. I wasn't sure whether the timing would be appropriate, but I'm pleased that you, I think, have been able to take account of the task and finish group report that we'll be looking at later on in the agenda from the pandemic group, which actually got into looking at resilience in communities, initially in terms of the pandemic, but also in the broader sense, and some recommendations in that report. And I'm pleased the timing has actually allowed you to take account of that, noting the references to Moor Close, which was a very interesting example of the kind of, I think, of the kind of thing that you're referring to. My bonnet, and I make no apology, is that sometimes officers talk to communities and miss out the members, and members are supposed to be the key link between the organisation and the communities that they represent. And I wonder, I don't know, my impression is that in Moor Close, for example, whilst the research went on and our council officers were involved, I'm not sure that the actual elected members for Moor Close were involved in that project. And really, I mean, if they were, then fine. But really, when we're designing interventions in communities, designing conversations with communities, I think the members who represent those communities, whether that be a ward or a much bigger, wider area, like the whole of Maryport, for example, they members need to be part of those conversations. But I think you've taken that on board. Are there any other questions from members? I see Councillor Green, he's got his hand up. Ian, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Alex. Covered most things. I think one thing I only picked up on was, I think it's page 21, promoting health and active lifestyles. And also, the one addressing inequalities and hardship. And I think it comes down to detail, really. I think it's possibly an opportunity we might have missed. Is if we go down to our approach in active places, we've got there facilitate the provision of new and indoor and outdoor sports facilities. I think there's an opportunity in there to actually facilitate the use of Allerdale sports facilities from within the deprived areas, because we're all fully aware of, the link between health and well-being and the deprived areas. And I think anything we can do to promote the use of our facilities from within them deprived areas and improve the health and well-being, I think that's an opportunity that we maybe should be looking at in the future. And I've just thought it's an opportunity to actually include something in there, something along the lines of that. I think I'd facilitate and encourage the use of Allerdale services from within the most deprived areas of the borough. And it's just something along those lines, really, to help promote health and well-being from within them. That's all I had, really. Thank you for that. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, thanks, Ian. That's noted and welcome. Any other points from members? No. Oh well, you must be doing fine, Alex and Helen, because everybody seems to be happy with the work that's going on so far. Of course, it's a continuing process, isn't it? I mean, you finish the strategy and then you need to start reviewing it immediately to take account of things that have changed in the meantime, because it's a fast-changing situation. So, if there are no other points on that, okay, thank you to the officers who've presented, and to Marion, and to all who've contributed to the strategy. Remind me, when's it going for adoption? When you get to the point where you think it's stable enough to actually formally adopt it, even though you might have to start revising it the following week?
The plan at the moment, Chair, is, and it was dependent on today's feedback and the feedback that we've had to date, it is scheduled to go for an executive decision in February. And given that we haven't had any significant changes suggested, the plan is to still do that. But as you say, obviously, as soon as we adopt it, things will have moved on since we started this conversation, given where we are at the moment. So the main thing I think for us next is to start working on those delivery plans, and that's where we get into the detail of what we might actually try and work on in those different areas.
Yeah, we can no doubt have a conversation. We no doubt will when Nick and the rest of your team do the review of policies and strategies, as to whether this particular strategy, sitting immediately under the council plan, needs to go to council for adoption, or whether it's actually more the other way and is a how rather than a what question, and is an executive function. But that's an interesting conversation we can have about the relationship between council, executive, and overview and scrutiny in the policy making process for a future meeting, no doubt. Thank you very much. Right, next item on the agenda, where I can find my bit of paper. Next item on the agenda is the forward plan, which members should have received in the post, and which does, I'm pleased to say, just about start where we are. Okay, the Getting Building Fund submission outline business case has gone. Street Acquisition Land and Buildings has gone. Allerdale Investment Partnership, that's been passed. Now the Borough Council Waste Policy has been passed. So if we're looking further ahead, we'd really start, unless anybody's got any points on those issues that actually are matters for recent decision by executive like this week. We're starting from on page 15 on your supplementary papers, the working in supplementary planning document. Could I just remind members, and indeed remind myself, that the reason we look at the forward plan is, apart from, it's fascinating if you're interested in that sort of thing. The reason we look at the forward plan is to identify anything that we think as an overview and scrutiny committee we think should be the subject of input or review, advanced review by the overview and scrutiny committee before it actually goes to the decision-making body, whichever that is, to make the decision on it. So with that in mind, does anybody want to flag up anything from page 16?
Chair.
The document. Yes, Councillor Lansbury.
Chair, I haven't got that document because I subbed in late. So is there anything you feel I should flag up in my direction, can you? Because I can't see what you're looking at. Can I get it on the screen? I can get it on another screen.
Is it? Are you able to show us it, Lee or Ian?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it, Chair. Thank you.
Can you do that just to help Councillor Lansbury?
Thank you.
Also, I think there might be some changes that we can go through as well.
Okay.
Just leave it with us a moment.
Chair, while Lee's doing that, there have been some updates, I think. Can I just mute people who aren't speaking? There are some updates that have been sent through. So the strategic acquisitions of land and buildings that was down for December was, I think, moved into January, and I think perhaps has been to executive this week. The contract for supplier of testing Hackney carriages has been removed altogether. The strategic acquisitions of buildings in Maryport has been moved to the March executive. The proposed review of licensing fees and charges has been moved to March Council, which is to allow for consultation with the licensing committee. There has been added to Council for 27th of January the Cumbria Coastal Strategy, and the Allerdale Economic Strategy and Workington Investment Plan has been moved to the April executive, and the Scrap Metal Dealers Act was moved to the 24th of February executive. Sorry, I've finished on that.
Right. Thank you, Ian. Can everybody see Lee's screen where he's got what must be, I'm thinking, page 13 of the document?
That's right.
And you said the strategic acquisition of land and buildings was moved to January, but has been done. Now the investment partnership update was done. Can you go on to page 14, Lee? Thanks. Waste policy. Well, we've kind of just discussed the fact that that's been done, and we've focused on waste policy earlier in the meeting. The Scrap Metal Dealers Act. What did you say had happened to that, Ian?
Sorry, just 1 second. While I go back to that, that one has been moved to the 24th of February executive.
Right. Okay. Can we go on then to the next page? Page 15. Land and buildings in Maryport, I think, has been moved as well, has it?
Sorry, in which one? Maryport or Work?
Maryport. That's
yes. That
has been moved.
That has been moved to the March executive.
Right. Okay. And I think we've got an item on Maryport regeneration general, which I suppose that is part on our own work programme. Okay. If anybody's got any items they think we should be exercised about, please let us know. Page 16, Lee, please. The licensing fees and charges have gone back for consultation. Right, council tax based technical item, members' allowances. Well, that'll be interesting. Page 17, please. Yeah. working investment plan we've got on our agenda.
Well, and that one's gone to the April executive.
Right, we've got it on our work programme for March, I think. Finance report, of course, is standing item. Performance report, standing item. We've not got them on our agenda today because we're doing them next time, I think. Resilient community strategy. Okay, we've talked about that. Page 19. Lee, please. Standard budget items. We've got a working group on that. Are there any more? Is there a page 20? Oh, there is. Yeah. But those are all standard items. Okay. Right. Okay. So if there's nothing from the forward plan that anyone's shouted up about, but I've noticed, Ian, you did mention coastal strategy, something close to my heart. I think one of the key things about Allendale Borough Council is we've got a coastline. We've got the Solway, a unique feature of this area that I've constantly said we don't make enough of. So I think it would be helpful if we could not necessarily put it on the agenda, but could you send us a link, members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, could you send us a link to the coastal strategy so that we can have a look at it and decide whether we want to take any greater attention of it? And anyway, no doubt it'll be one of that raft of strategies that Nick Hardy's team will be looking at and trying to fit together with everything else that we do. So we need to understand where that fits into everybody else. We can do it. We can do that in the context of Nick's review, policy framework review. But if there's anything specific in the meantime, send us a link. Thanks very much.
I can do.
Anything else on forward plan? Yes, Ian.
Sorry, I just reminded that it was said that it was for the next council meeting, 27th of January. So I'm assuming it will be coming out in your papers shortly, but I'll get the link sent. I think if there's a link for anybody to look at, it might be something for the climate change group to explore as well, because there's clearly a link to coastal and climate change.
Did you say it was going to council on the 27th of January?
That's what my list tells me. That's what my list tells me.
It's unusual for something to go to council kind of out of the blue like that, isn't it? Could you? I wonder if. And why is that going? Why is that going to council rather than executive? Which I think makes the point that there seems to be some confusion about what goes to council and what goes to executive. Perhaps Nick could explain that to us in a moment. Sally, you wanted to say something.
Well, two things. I couldn't actually hear what Ian said. There was so much reverb. Is it me or is it me for everybody? It's me. It's for everybody. So I couldn't hear what Ian said in response to the question. And then I wanted to mention something about the forward plan about Treasury. So it was to make sure that we are scrutinising that the council is divesting from funds that are damaging to the climate. We've committed to climate action, so we must be looking that our investment funds aren't in the wrong place. So I somehow want to get that as part of when we're reviewing the Treasury.
I think the opportunity to do that will come through the Audit Committee's regular review of the Treasury Management Strategy, which is their territory rather than Overview and Scrutiny's territory, although we can comment on it, of course. But I think we need to ensure that those representations that Councillor Lansbury just made there get fed into the Audit Committee, particularly if it's something coming from the Climate Change Group, there's no reason why the climate change group's recommendations in terms of those kind of matters around treasury management shouldn't be made directly to the audit committee, which meets on the 1st of February, I believe. So there's an opportunity, Sally, for your group to communicate directly with the audit committee on that issue, which I'd urge you to take up.
Thanks, we'll look into that. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Ian, do you want to say again what Sally didn't hear?
I was just going to ask you about it. So the Cumbria Coastal Strategy is due to go to the 27th of January council meeting. And I think the bit that maybe wasn't heard was the point that I was making was that there's clearly a connection between the coast and the work of the climate change group. And perhaps if there was a need for some further detailed work, that would be the route to doing that. Given the time that we're in at the moment, because obviously it hasn't had a chance to come to scrutiny beforehand.
Okay, thank you. The question I had about that was, it's quite unusual for something like the Cumbria Coastal Strategy, which I don't think had been on anybody's radar, to appear kind of out of the blue and go straight on to a council agenda for adoption without, so far as we could tell, anybody having any members anyway, having had any kind of involvement or even awareness of its existence. I wonder maybe if Nick could fill us in a little bit on the background as that, so we understand what's going on. Sorry, Nick.
Yeah, apology accepted, Councillor. I don't have any background on it, I'm afraid, so I'm not sure. I think in the past it's a document that's come through the county council and we've endorsed that document. I think it came through a number of years ago, I seem to recall. I'm afraid I haven't seen a draft copy of this one this time round. As to why it's gone to council and not the executive, I'm not entirely sure. Again, that could be a historical thing as opposed to a functional thing, but I'll try and find an answer and I will get back to you all.
Thank you. It would be appreciated. It just seems to have appeared out of the blue. If you could circulate something to us, Nick, on that would be very helpful. Thank you. On the strategy itself, a link to the strategy itself, and an explanation of what the decision-making process on that has been. I mean, if we're just sitting like nodding through something the county council's just decided, and he's going to tell us we need to approve, then I might jib at that. But anyway, let's see. Okay, forward plan. Nothing else on the forward plan. Can we next look at the work programme, which we're well through and haven't got much left on it. The first thing I think I need to note, or members need to note, is I understand that we were on the 26th of February, we were looking at development of a new housing strategy, but I'm told that that's not going to be, because of, you can guess, because of all the various things that have happened, that's not going to be ready for us on the 26th of February. So it's probably going to have to go back into next year's programme. The suggestion is from the chairs that we replace the development of a new housing strategy as an item with a presentation and discussion on the council's project management system, which is fundamental actually, because all the things we're talking about are underpinned by whatever methodology and philosophy our project management system actually has. So in order to understand how things get developed and how policy gets made, we need to understand the council's project management system, both in terms of policy and in terms of projects and in terms of services. So we just need to ensure that we understand it and that our project management system actually does indeed reflect the policies and priorities that the council has and adopted. We've got a read through from policy into actual implementation, from high level policy, like in the Resilient Community Strategy, for example, and things happening on the ground. In particular, particularly noting the reference Alex made in the Resilient Community Strategy to the need to change the way we engage with people, and to bring people along with projects that are being developed. I think we need to understand how our project management system does that or doesn't. Councillor Daniels.
Thank you, Chair. I spoke to Andrew about your housing strategy because, I mean, basically, what concerns me is we have a chat of a strategy, but we don't have any plan on doing anything about it. I mean, for instance, there's a housing strategy for Keswick, which says that we will build 25 affordable houses. This is in the last planning strategy. They would build 25 affordable houses over a 5-year period. In other words, 100 houses over 5 years. But having a strategy is lovely, but are we actually going to have any plans of making this happen? As you know, we have a Keswick Community Housing Trust, but you know, you can't expect them to be building houses all the time. Does council have a strategy to build? Are we talking to construction companies, or are we just, you know, is that just a pipe dream? Because, you know, strategies without action are, frankly, in my opinion, not worth the paper they're written on.
You're quite right, Alan. Yeah. Yeah. Strategy is what you do, in principle. If you don't do it, you might have a strategy, but you haven't really got a strategy. You've just got a bit of paper. So what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting, Alan? Do you want to still to do something about housing in February, or are you content to wait until something is brought forward for us? Or I suppose the other alternative, as there's a delay in developing the housing strategy, would you like to be part of a short task and finish group that worked alongside the development of the housing strategy to the point at which it's ready to come to us? What do you
I have spoken to Nick about that, and I would like to be at some point included on the new housing strategy. I can just give you some figures. Just as you know, Keswick Community Housing Trust, I'm a board member. We just had one house which we had to rent. We had 38 applications for that one house, which shows you what the house need is in Keswick. So yeah, it would be very nice. Thank you, Chair, if I could get involved in the new strategy policy. Thank you very much.
Nick, have you a method in mind in which Councillor Daniels and maybe other councillors could be involved in that, less formally, rather than just bringing something to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as a formal report in February, as that's been postponed? Is there a way of involving members in thinking and developing the housing strategy before it actually comes back to Overview and Scrutiny Committee at some point in the future?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of things. So firstly, I think there's a project team that's been set up to look at a number of different issues across housing, and I think Councillor Daniels is one of the Keswick members that we invited along to that, because there's been some particular issues around some of the policies in Keswick, and that'll scope some of the work going forward. The next key decision for us really is in terms of the budget for next year, which is around the housing needs assessment and the stock condition surveys, and they will really form the kind of the bedrock for the next strategy. If you remember, what my suggestion was that when we've got that budget in place, and we've got a clear route as to the direction that we'll take in that, I have that informal policy group that I've said I would pull together to have a separate conversation around the housing strategy and work through us on the housing strategy. So I think I would suggest that that's the way forward. Possibly in terms of your agenda for the next meeting, I'm hoping to get the first draft of the new economic development strategy at the end of this month. And I would obviously like to put it in front of scrutiny before we eventually take it through the executive. So if you're amenable to that, I'd quite like to keep that slot for housing and possibly bring the first draft of the economic development strategy for consultation at that point.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Daniels? One option, of course, might have been to establish a task and finish group, but this isn't. There's no finish to this. It's a continuing conversation about the evolution of policy. I mean, we're not going to be able to do a task and finish group in 2 or 3 months and say, produce them and say, right, that's it, that's housing sorted in Keswick and everywhere else. It's a continuing conversation we need to have. So I think if Nick's going to arrange a policy group looking at housing, which will involve an input and involvement of members as and when they need to be involved, if that's okay with you, Councillor Daniels, I suggest we go in that direction rather than setting up a task and finish group as such.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Thank you, Chair. That's fine with me.
Okay, right. In terms of the February 26th agenda, I think the suggestion is we have a look at the economic development strategy, which is fine. Everybody happy with that? If it's going to be ready for us, Nick, yeah. But I don't want to lose sight of the project management issue as well, and I'd like to see if we can get an initial brief 15-minute, at least 15-minute discussion on project management at that February meeting, even if it means we can't conclude anything there necessarily and have to take another report later on. But I really would like to start the conversation about project management at our next meeting. Even if we don't finish it at our next meeting, I think we really need to make a start on that conversation at our next meeting. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Anything else on the work programme that as it sits at the moment? We've got the main important work in regeneration programme scheduled for March. For April, sorry, we've got representatives of some other scrutiny bodies feeding back to us, and at some point we do need to consider the annual work programme and make recommendations on the annual work programme for next year.
Chair, maybe you would like to think about how you would like to do that, because sometimes we've done that in a separate informal workshop for members outside the committee meeting. Sometimes we've done it in the meeting. So maybe it'd be worth thinking about that either this meeting or next meeting.
I'm inclined to think that we need to have an involvement of a much broader spectrum of members in deciding in that kind of agenda setting. So I'm inclined to go with the idea of the workshop. What I'm not sure about is how effective a workshop could be conducted in sort of Zoom conditions. But we'll maybe think about that outside the meeting, Ian, with the co-chairs and yourself, can think about how we can actually structure something that does enable other members of council to feed into what should be on the overview and scrutiny work programme, and that enables them to have a say on it. So we can discuss that. There are a couple of things that we do need to make sure we don't lose, as I mentioned before, which we can note as potentials now. Obviously, there's the issue of the housing strategy. That's not going to go away. There's the issue of Nick's team's review of policies and strategies across the council. That needs to come back at some point. I don't know whether Nick's got any idea when that might be. something that we could pick up possibly when some of the COVID-related workload is, fingers crossed, whenever that is, dropped away a bit, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's quite a lot of the team are pretty much full-time on COVID response at this moment in time. And Alex and Andrea and such like are heavily involved in the grants programs and Viv as well. So that's taken quite a lot of the resource. So at the moment, that one is sitting in abeyance. Obviously, I would hope that in the near future that situation will change.
Okay, thanks, Nick. We could just make a note not to forget it for the moment, and look at how that gets picked up. And also, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly when we need to start the re-procurement exercise for our leisure centres, which came up at the last meeting, and members of the committee would have had some a short briefing on the financial position in the context of COVID about our sports and leisure centres, which we need to pick up. I can't remember when the current contracts expire, but it's sometime in the next couple of years. So we need to programme starting a review of what our objectives should be for re-procuring sports and leisure facilities when the current contract with GLL expires. And that's something we need to feed into next year's agenda somewhere, because that's kind of dictated by the timing of the contract renewal. Okay, anybody got anything else they want to flag up at this stage? No? Okay, we'll park that for now. And then we go on to task and finish group updates. Can we deal with the pandemic task and finish group first? We've had the report circulated to members, I think, although it didn't come out with the agenda papers, for which my apologies. I didn't ensure that it did. But members have had that report. A lot of it's been picked up in the Resilient Community Strategy, which is probably the right place for it at this stage. Anybody got any comments or questions on the pandemic task group report process so far? No, the next item we need to consider.
I had my hand up.
Sorry, Alan, didn't spot your hand.
Okay.
Fire away.
Yeah, I read through the report. One of the things that has come to our notice here, St Herbert's School in Keswick sent out a kind of emergency needing money to pay for tablets for their kids who are at home to continue their lessons. And we have responded, a couple of the charitable groups like the Lions and whatever, Rotary, our town council, etc., and our community asset company. Is there any help from Allerdale as far as providing funds for these tablets? Because we don't want our kids to be missing. They talk about how important the kids are, but without the goods, the tools to be able to continue schooling, it's quite difficult. So is there any strategy in Allerdale for providing money to pay for it? I mean, I can imagine this is Allerdale wide with all the schools. I'm sure the schools don't have a whole rack of money in their back pocket to buy these tablets. So is there a grant or is there any funding available for this? It is quite important, I feel.
Not that I know of, Alan. I don't know if anybody else. Is Helen got a hand up there? Can you help us, Helen?
Yeah, there is a piece of work going on around digital inclusion in schools. Is it okay to pick up with you after, Councillor Daniels, about which school it is? There's a piece of work being led by the County Council, and we are supporting that work. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, after we finish, give me a call or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. On that wider point, thank you, Helen. Could you let the I think this probably, I'm guessing, would be of interest to the Pandemic Task and Finish Group, because it's affecting the delivery of public services and how education in particular gets delivered or doesn't get delivered in the absence of the right kit when kids are homeschooling. So, Alan, could you please get the information about that to what's being done to the Pandemic Task and Finish Group via Ian, please, and we can look at that one of the things we can look at the next meeting. I'm not, on the wider point, I'm not aware of any Allerdale Council grant funding or scheme that's been established to particularly assist with schools, though I know there have been such things in the past, but that wasn't particularly associated with schools. It was about digital inclusion and wider digital inclusion, especially in the deprived communities, and making broadband and Wi-Fi and so on accessible to people in deprived communities. So maybe actually that's something that the Pandemic Task and Finish Group could look at, because what we're actually seeing, one impact of the pandemic has been the shift of things online, which is fine, and we all seem to be fine to a greater or lesser extent. But if you haven't got broadband and you haven't got Wi-Fi and you haven't got anything other than you haven't got a PC or a tablet, how the hell do you manage? Even how the hell do you manage getting your shopping if you're supposed to shield, for example? How do you get your shopping if you haven't got access to getting online shopping? God knows. So maybe this the consequence of this shift of things online, particularly for people who don't have online access, is something maybe the Pandemic Task and Finish Group could look at its next meeting.
Well, Chair, one of the things that would be useful to identify at the moment is what the next iteration of that group might look at, because there's been a contribution from Councillor McCarran Holmes, who's particularly interested in the effects on the council and its staff and the council services. So there are two ideas there, and maybe the next meeting should determine which of those it wishes to pick up. But perhaps people have a thought about which is more pertinent at the moment.
Any views on that? No. Well, I hesitate to have another meeting just to plan about what we're going to talk about at the following meeting. I think if we're going to have a Pandemic Task and Finish Group meeting, it needs to have a task to undertake. It needs to have something to look at. Maybe we could look at the next meeting the suggestions from Kearney about impact on the council's own staff and operations, which is clearly important, and maybe suggest that we do the stuff about the digital divide as the next task after that. Is that okay with people? I mean, I don't want to dictate the agenda, but I think unless we actually give the Pandemic Task and Finish Group something to talk about, it'll spend its next meeting, ruminating on what it should be talking about, and that's just a waste of time.
No, I think that makes sense, Mike.
Okay, right, we'll go with that then. Okay, so are we any other issues on the Pandemic Task and Finish Group? No. Okay, we'll set up a meeting for that as soon as we can. Of course, it's open to anyone at any time to dip in and out of these Task and Finish groups. So if anybody's interested in joining that group to look at those particular issues, then just please let us please let us know. We'll be circulating all members of the council as well, seeking volunteers. Okay, Councillor Lansbury, Sally.
Thanks, Mike. Just on that, it may be worth contacting the project managers from each area who were involved in the response. So for, you know, in our area, it's Keswick Community Emergency Response Group, and how it, are you looking at it as a community response or the council's response?
I think the suggestion that it is we start off at the first meeting looking at how the council responded, the impact it has had on the council's operating model. But having said that, Sally, you make a fair point, and maybe that's something else we could put on the list of things to look at.
Yeah, just to, so I don't want to talk too long on it, but just as a something that happened at the very beginning was that there was duplication in the number of agencies that got involved in delivering the responses. So, you know, the community groups got set up, and then the Allerdale Hub got set up, and then Cumbria County Council got set up, and the hub got established. That the hub came a bit later than the community responses. So, you know, there's a few learning lessons. You know, there's a little bit of duplication of effort in the early stages of response.
Well, perhaps that's something we look at in the context of the impact it's had on the council, because if we didn't respond to it in the most efficient and effective way, then that's something we need to learn for the future. By didn't respond in the most efficient and effective way, if we did trample over things that were already in existence, then that wasn't good. But anyway,
it wasn't trampling over, but there was an element of duplication in that they didn't know what other local groups were set up to do.
Well, there's a lesson for us. Maybe we could look at in context of the council's response. Was the council sufficiently aware of what was going on around the place anyway in terms of these community emergency response groups? I don't know. Perhaps we could look at that. So we could do that as part of that next exercise. Okay, that's budget, pandemic task and finish group. Next one, I think, is budget task and finish group. The budget, I think I ended up chairing it by default. I'm open to anyone else chairing it, by the way. We had a meeting with the finance officer and basically looked at understanding the way the budget is put together. We then looked at, in general, in principle, we then looked at the way in which this year's budget is being put together. Specifically, what are the cost pressures? What are the growth pressures? What are the savings pressures? And had a range of questions to ask of the finance team about some of the issues that had been put forward for budgetary change, growth. We noticed a lack of suggestions for savings from the part of services, which is perhaps not surprising, but plenty of suggestions for growth, but couldn't quite understand the basis for some of them. So we've asked questions about that. Unfortunately, we've not yet had a response to the detail of those questions. The idea was that we would, if you like, shadow the decision-making process. The budget decision-making process is put together by the senior management team with input from the executive, and eventually finally decision by the executive as to what goes forward. What we wanted to do was not second-guess the decision-making process, but just check the decision-making process to see that it was based on sound evidence and policy, and not just based on whims or hobby projects. Because it may surprise you to learn, but it has been known in councils all over the country in the past that some things appear in the budget because somebody's got a particular hobby horse about them, rather than because there's a particular policy driver for them. There are numerous examples of that, which I won't bother enumerating at the moment. You could probably all think of some. So the idea was to test the robustness of the budget making process in the context that we're in. That process is still continuing, so we're not in a position yet to test its robustness, and we're not in a position yet to have answers to the questions we asked. So there needs to be another meeting of the Budget Task and Finish group pretty soon, because all that's got to be sorted by the end of, I think, by the end of January, or at least the early part of February, in order for a budget to be proposed to the council meeting in March. So we need to we'll make sure we keep an eye on that and move on that as soon as we possibly can. I understand the pressures on the finance team, but I think it needs to be understood that if overview and scrutiny asks a question, then in law, overview and scrutiny gets an answer, and that's something we, although we can understand the pressures, that's something we need to insist on. Have we got any other task and finish groups running, Ian? I can't remember. Ian Grady, you've got your hand up.
Yes, the procurement task and finish group, the report that came to committee. It was due to go to executive on Wednesday. There was confusion about the start time of the meeting. I agreed to go to the executive meeting at about 5:15, but apparently it started at 4 o'clock. And rather than just let the report go, the deputy leader's been back in touch with me and invited me to the informal executive meeting where we can discuss any issues around the report, so we can get it through sooner rather than later. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. In terms of practicalities.
Yeah.
But just for the record, I think at some point it needs to be, an executive meeting needs to formally receive it.
Yes.
Because of course, then if it doesn't, there's no trail of what happened, because informal executives don't get minuted. So I
think the intention was I'll go along to the informal executive so they could actually ask any questions. And I think it needs somebody to go along there to actually answer those questions, because there is quite a few issues that actually came out of it. And it's only fair that they have an opportunity to ask those questions of the actual task and finish group representative, really. And I think it'll actually be accepted at the actual formal executive, the next formal executive, once that's been done.
Right. Okay. So informal discussion first.
Yeah.
Involving what? Just yourself or members of the task and finish group as well?
Just myself.
Right. Okay. Right. As long as we're okay to answer their questions, that's fine. Councillor Lansbury.
No, I was just following up on what Ian said. I wondered what the next steps after it had gone to exec would be, because obviously there were a lot of recommendations there. So I was not clear on the pathway of that report after exec.
Well, let's see what exec decides to do with it first, because that might tell us what the pathway is. We assume we make recommendations to the executive so that they will do something with them. So let's see what they decide to do with it, and then we'll know where it goes next.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure Ian, Councillor Ian, will be able to feed back to us on that, so that we know that actually is going somewhere.
Yeah, that's the intention, Mike.
Okay, thanks very much. Right, I thought the procurement task and finish group had done, so I'd forgotten about it. I thought we'd done it, but never mind. Any others?
No, none running at the moment.
Right. Okay.
I think my note in the afternoon is that I'm setting up a meeting of the pandemic group and a meeting of the budget group as soon as I can.
Yeah. Yes, please. And there is less formally, rather than constituting formal task and finish groups, there is less formally a continuing conversation between the policy team, led by Nick and Alex and Helen and others, and members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which I think actually is, as it should be, informal continuing conversations between policy team and members of Overview and Scrutiny, I think is how it should work, rather than necessarily everything having to come through a formal process, provided, of course, that those discussions are reported at some point into the formal process. Okay, is there anything else on task and finish groups? No. Okay. Anybody want to say anything else while you've got the chance? No. Well, in that case, then I will thank you all for your. Alan Daniels, you've got your hand up.
Just a sort of a thought. Having read the pandemic report, it strikes me as maybe people forget that there is poverty in Keswick. I know everybody on the West Coast thinks the streets are lined with gold and everybody drives Rolls Royces, but we do have quite a lot of people, school kids, who are on free school meals. I think it's over 100 between the two schools. There's quite a few people receiving food parcels, and I had a report today from our vicar who noticed that a house where he knew people were living was in darkness. When he knocked on the door, those people could not afford to pay electricity, and that's why their house was in darkness. Now, I worry that Keswick does get missed out in these policies, and I wish that we could possibly be included. We actually gave the family, or we did, a Battersby Trust actually gave the family enough money to pay their electricity bill so they could have it. But it really, I find it a bit irritating that when Keswick is just kind of totally forgotten when poverty and need is discussed, so I just like that to be taken into account at some point.
I think Helen raised.
Alan, you're quite right. There is poverty and deprivation in scattered all over the place, everywhere, in different concentrations. But if you're, it doesn't matter if you're unemployed. The percentage unemployment doesn't matter. You're 100% unemployed, even if you're the only one in your village. So that does need to be recognised. I'm sure Alex has heard what you said, and Nick said what you said, and Helen said what you said. And I know the Resilient Community Strategy does suggest that it isn't just for deprived communities as such. It's for resilient communities, and any community which has got people in poverty and unable to participate in their community, however rich the community overall might be, is not a resilient community, and that needs to be dealt with. Helen, you've got your hand up.
Yes, can I just take the opportunity to remind that if you find people in immediate need, there is a way, contact the County Council through the Waste to Welfare. If you go to their homepage, on their website, there is all the links to where there's need to support, because there may be support there. You just need just to let everybody know. So I will keep on flagging that up.
Could you send me that link, Helen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you send it to everyone, Helen?
Absolutely. I will do that. I will send something out after this meeting, but yeah, I'll put that up again with Councillor Daniels as well. We're going to have a lot to talk about.
It's going to be a long conversation, Helen.
Sally Lansbury, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. It's for Helen and Alex again, really. So, Alan, Councillor Daniels just triggered something I was trying to get put into words regarding the resilient community strategy, and it has something to do with community cohesion, because community resilience isn't all of the poverty is definitely a significant part of it, but there's other elements that contribute to poor community cohesion, which could be that your population's getting excessively older, or is excessively not people who are involved in the community because their second homeowners, or they're just here to run a business. So therefore, for our children, for the young people in Keswick, we've got a big problem because there's a less of a body of them to provide services for them. So we still need things as to be a resilient community, and also to man all the community groups that are needed behind the scenes in a town to keep things moving on. So that it was just to, if we can somehow build that in there, is that community cohesion can be related to wealth levels, but it can also, poor community cohesion can be created by divisions of wealth, or maybe, sorry, I'm not explaining that very well. I started off better than I finished there, but it's something to do with community cohesion not being only linked to poverty levels or at one particular estate that's causing a problem. It can also be a sort of more longer term change in the makeup of the community, and that needs to be addressed as well.
Sally, I recognise what you're saying. That's been a policy issue that's been picked up in the past in this area. It maybe not in the forefront of the resilient community strategy as it stands now, but it's kind of implicit in there. And maybe when we get onto the delivery plans that sit below it, Alex will have an opportunity to bring some of those points out more fully, because you can't actually cover everything in these documents. But as long as we're aware, and I think we are aware that is an issue in some parts of in the imbalance in the nature of the makeup of a particular community, whether it be rich or poor, can cause problems. Yeah. Okay. Right. Are we done? Members, thank you very much. Thank you, members, for attending. Thank you to Mary Fitzgerald for presenting earlier. Thank you to the officers who supported the meeting, and I'll close the meeting now. Have as good a weekend as you can in the circumstances.